Good evening. After we had that fun with that 10 questions dude, I was asked to take part on a set of 78 questions by this guy. There'll be a big difference this time, though. Yeah, he has some Fundy atheist ideas, but unlike a lot of them, he tries to be civil. He even calls himself the friendly atheist. So I'll be giving him a little bit of a break. And one other thing, unlike last time, well, it wouldn't be as easy to make fair use of his material, so we're gracing him with a little makeover. Not bad, huh? We'll start with the first set of questions next time, but here's a sum of how we'll do this. We'll present the questions in clusters by topic in each of our vids. Each question will be presented, and then I'll put up a simple yes or no. Unless a question has what I see as a false premise. Then I'll note that instead. Then I'll explain my answer. In a lot of cases there will be some defining context that will make a simple yes or no answer extremely insufficient. So make sure you hear the whole thing before you go off on a rant. It's time to start looking at those 78 questions. And here we'll just look at the first 7, which all have to do with hell and the afterlife. Ready?
Is Anne Frank burning in hell?
Oh, some of you Fundy atheists expected a yes, huh? Well, too bad. But the question earned a no because of just one word in there, burning. Your host is asking about a highly literalist experience of hell, which I don't subscribe to. In my view, hell is a state of shame, not a place of fiery torture. Now, I expect you'll ask, what do I think Anne Frank is up to right now? You still think she's in hell even if she's not on fire. Now, fair enough. I'll give you a summary of what I think is happening, based on my studies of honor and shame, and on what little we actually know about Anne Frank and her life. First thing we can say is that in the version of hell I subscribe to, shame is experienced in accordance with how much you have to be ashamed of. In other words, the degree of your sin. Now, based on what little we know, I don't think Anne Frank had too much to be ashamed of. My view of hell also is influenced by something Jesus said here about rewards in heaven. Under an honor and shame rubric, any evil you suffer here is counted against your experience of shame and lessens it. So, all of Anne Frank's suffering at the hands of the Nazis would proportionately lessen the severity of her experience in hell, which would leave her with, what? Well, if I had to guess, I'd say it wouldn't be far off from what some Catholic viewers would describe as limbo. She wouldn't get access to God or be a member of His covenant, but she also wouldn't experience much in the way of shame. I'd say it's probably no worse than living in one of these places. And one other thing which I admit is speculative. I happen to think that part of the eternal punishment given to the Nazis that hurt Anne Frank will be that they have to serve her and do what they can to make her life and eternity more comfortable.
How about Mahatma Gandhi?
Same answer, of course, for the same reason. Gandhi's case is a bit more complex since he was older and a lot more experienced in life, but the same principles apply.
Is Fred Phelps in heaven since he believed in the divinity of Jesus?
I'm not so sure Fred Phelps did have an orthodox Christology. He may have believed Jesus was divine, but that's not the sole criterion. You can believe Jesus is divine, but also believe he was the son of the Norse god Thor. But let's forget the specific example of Phelps and go to the probable point of the question. Suppose we have a bad Christian who does a lot of evil in their life. Do they go to heaven? Well, based on my last 2 answers, you already know that I think heaven is all about honor, not that it's a magic, happy, fun place. So if you have someone who joins the covenant of Christ and then screws up to the max, what is heaven like for them? Let me put it this way, as I like to. The New Jerusalem will probably have a lot of these. Guess who gets to clean them?
Should a killer who genuinely repents at the end of his life go to heaven?
Whenever a person joins the covenant of Christ, we're told that they die. The old man is dead. The person who was that killer is dead, and it's a new person who goes to heaven. That said, their life in heaven will also be of equality according to their deeds after conversion, which won't allow for very much. I have to say, too, that this is kind of funny. If I had answered no to this one, the Fundy atheists wouldn't be a lot happier. They'd probably come up with some sass about how an all-powerful God can't find a way to save a killer.
Should a kind-hearted atheist go to hell for all eternity?
Same issues apply here as in questions 1 and 2. If you really are a kind-hearted atheist, well, you can expect to live next door to Anne in one of these.
Do kind-hearted religious people who just aren't Christians also deserve to burn in eternity in hell?
Well, by now you know the false premise. No burning. Otherwise, it's the same as the prior question.
Would you be happy in heaven if someone you love was in hell suffering for all eternity as you watch?
Yeah, look, again. Heaven isn't the magic, happy, fun place. In fact, if you look at Jesus' parables, it's a lot of work. Sure, there's no sadness or tragedy, but that doesn't mean you get to sit around partying. I wouldn't be happy or unhappy about someone being in hell. You may as well be happy or unhappy about the law of gravity. It's time for part 2, but I'm going to switch things up a bit. One thing I've learned from these answers series for sure is that you can't count on Fundy Atheists to do any serious research about your claims and arguments. At most, they'll ask you a bunch of dumb questions. Then when you answer them, they'll ask 3 times more dumb questions showing how little they understood what you said. The classic example happened in part 1 of this series, where a bunch of them had this idea that I just made up the whole template of honor and shame. So this means what for this time? Well,
if your child was dying, and I hope that never happens, I seriously hope that never happens, would you just pray for them, or would you take them to a doctor?
Yeah, you can see where this is all going. It's the same old story we've had a few times before here, on prayer. The last time I pointed this out, a lot of Fundy Atheists didn't pay attention, so I'm going to put it in their face this time, okay? If you're a long-time viewer who's seen this before, please bear with us. And maybe use your control buttons at the bottom of this bid to fast forward.
Hey Christians, this is Mitch again, and this time I want to talk to you about the problem of unanswered prayer. You know, Jesus made a lot of extraordinarily broad promises about prayer and what it can do for you. Check out some of these. Wow, that's some powerful stuff. But hey, when was the last time you had all your prayers answered, huh? Listen, as Christians, you have to take what Jesus said seriously. But the only way you can get out of this is to have his words die a death of 1,000 qualifications. Why not take the easier answer? Prayer doesn't always get answered because God doesn't exist.
Here we go again, I suppose.
Aw, come on, why can't you leave me alone?
Oh, because, old chap, you can't seem to stop fouling up your exegesis.
Hey, you leave my digestive problems out of this.
Yes. Look here, old bean. You speak of not taking Jesus' word seriously, yes?
Well, yeah, he meant what he said, and he said what he meant. That's the way I see it.
Oh, indeed, but, are you quite certain you know what he said?
It's right there in plain English, ain't it?
Let me show you something. Now you know this story, yes?
Yeah, what does that have to do with anything?
Do you think this promise was literal?
I don't know. It does seem kind of weird for Herod to promise up to half his kingdom. Maybe he was exaggerating.
Oh, so you don't take what Herod said seriously?
Hey, I didn't say that. I said... Wait a minute. Are you saying that Jesus' prayer promises are like Herod promising half his kingdom?
Why, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, think about it. If Herod's promise were actually fully literal, one would have to assume that the girl's immediate answer would be along the lines of, "Why, thank you, sir, I'll take the north half, please." After all, with that kind of power, she could get her mother John the Baptist's head anyway. The key here is that to offer half of one's possession was a favored expression. It simply meant that the person was exceedingly grateful and wished to bestow a generous reward. By the same token, it's a decontextualization to take Jesus' prayer promises as literal promises that are to be taken liberally advantage of. Promises like Herod's were made with the full understanding that they were dramatic hyperbole, not an ironclad literal guarantee. So it's not me who doesn't take Jesus' word seriously, old man. It's you.
That's really weird. I figured you'd go for the argument that prayers aren't answered because it isn't God's will.
Oh, that's quite true as well, but the reality is that in Jesus' day and age, only a small number of sages were considered pious enough to ask for anything they wanted and receive it. And the pious, of course, wouldn't be going around asking for just anything they wanted, but only what they supposed to be in the will of God.
Aw, come on, that's just a qualification you're adding. Jesus didn't say anything about God's will.
Oh, he hardly had to. A call to believing prayer presupposed a heart of piety submitted to God's will. It's inherent in the very nature of the proposition. Oh, and also have a look at these.
Okay, so?
Well, notice the objects of each prayer, basically daily staples. Not a Rolls Royce or wealth or even being spared suffering or ill health. Now, given those parameters, do you really think those promises by Jesus offer a chance at unlimited largesse? Or do you suppose they might suggest a more humble approach?
Well, I guess. But what's the point of prayer then?
Well, within the context of an ancient patronage relationship, one in which God the Father is patron and believers are clients, Jesus acts as a broker for those prayers. In such situations, no client expected unlimited granting requests, and likely even knew many of them would not be granted. However, submitting the request was a proper and honorable way of recognizing the authority of the patron. That's also why persistence in prayer is presented as a model. One was expected to continue to recognize the patron's authority even when a prayer was not answered positively.
So what you're saying is, prayer was sometimes sort of like a legal formality?
That would be a somewhat rough way of putting it, but it'll do. Okay, with that in mind, let's answer the questions.
If your child was dying, and I hope that never happens, I seriously hope that never happens, would you just pray for them, or would you take them to a doctor?
Definitely, take them to the doctor. Prayer? Well, that's up to you. So now.
And if you do both, which one do you think has more of an impact?
So yeah, here's the false premise again, that the purpose of both of these things is to make an impact. If you paid attention to the vid we just showed, you know that's not what prayer is for.
Whose prayers does God answer?
This is not something you really answer that simply, though. As I said in that prior vid, only the pious who knew God's will expected a positive answer to prayer, because the point of prayer wasn't to ask for stuff.
If it's ultimately His will, why even bother praying?
As that prior vid says, you bother in order to show your proper place in a patronage relationship, not to ask for stuff. And no, Fundy Atheist, I didn't make up that stuff about clients and patrons.
If you have cancer, what would help you more, certain drugs or prayer?
Yeah, basically the same question as the first one we covered this time. Just a different topic.
Let's say you had an amputated limb. Would prayer ever bring it back?
Yeah, well, you know where this one comes from. And just for the record and for fun, let's see my prior answer again. Once again, bear with us while we hold a bottle to the mouths of the Fundy Atheist.
In this short video, I'm going to assume that you're an educated Christian. You have a college degree and you've been trained to think logically and rationally about the world we live in.
Oh, great. Someone put this mess on my channel. Alright, we'll just deal with it. Oh, no, not that I haven't before. You see this website listed in the corner? Yeah, it's been around a while. Stupid as all get out. When it first came out, it was called Why Does God Hate Amputees? And I did a parody of it on one of my other websites. I'll give you a link in the vid description. But anyway, since it seems this mess is here now, we'll go ahead and thrash it a bit. There's 10 questions. Well, we'll do one or so at a time. That's about all I can stand before stuff like this makes me lose my lunch.
For example, you might be an engineer or scientist, a doctor, pharmacist or nurse, a teacher, a manager or an administrator, a government
Yeah, or a garbage man or a crab fisherman or a guy who makes boring vids that look like 2-bit PowerPoints. Sheesh.
Religion. Here's an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. As a Christian, you believe in the power of prayer. According to a recent poll, 3 out of 4 doctors believe that God is performing medical miracles on earth right now. Most Christians believe that God is curing cancers.
Whoa! See this vid? Let's get some things straight. I don't go in for this on-demand right now view of prayer these nutballs think represents the reality. Yeah, I know, you got lackeys like this character who think that's the way prayer works. I know that. But you want the serious biblical grasp on prayer? That's not who you go to. You want to know where these guys who made that website went for their views on Christian prayer? Take a guess. Yeah, real professional sources there. Oh, now this refers to a poll of doctors. Well, I don't know or care what polls say, but if you want the best and most scholarly treatment of whether miracles take place today, including medical ones, this 2-volume set by a scholar named Craig Keener is the bomb, okay? Alright.
Diseases, reversing the effects of poison, and so on. So here's question 1. Why won't God heal amputees? It's a simple question, isn't it? We all know that
simple-minded is more
legs
like
do
it.
not spontaneously regenerate in response to prayer. Amputees get no miracles from God. If you're an intelligent person, you have to admit that this is an interesting question. On the one hand, you believe that God answers prayers and performs miracles. On the other hand, you know that God completely ignores amputees when they pray for miracles. How do you deal with this discrepancy? As an intelligent person, you have to deal with it because it makes no sense. In order to handle it, notice that you have to create some kind of rationalization. You have to invent an excuse on God's behalf to explain this strange fact of life. You might say, well, God must have some kind of special plan for amputees.
What?
So
God has a special plan for amputees. Great. That's what this guy thinks is our best answer. Okay, let me give you mine. It's a little dishonest to compare prayer for the curing of cancer to prayers for lost legs to regrow. I mean, let's face it, losing limbs isn't a pleasant thing, sure. But in the end, it doesn't threaten your life, and it ain't going to kill you the way a cancer could. So here's the bottom line. Smart Boy here has set the bar of expectation higher than it should be with his cockeyed view of prayer. Then he made it worse by equating cancer with amputation in terms of seriousness. Alright, back to this guy.
If you heard stories about an amputated limb ever growing back, how come there's never a camera around when anything like that happens?
Oh, a good answer to this was given by Craig Keener in this book. Basically, it's because no one is expecting a miracle, so people aren't carrying cameras around. That said, Keener does discuss examples of miracles that manage to get fairly well documented, even if not with a camera. So check it out.
How come there's no cameras around when any miracles happen?
Well, this is obviously a different form of the same question.
If you had an exam coming up, what do you think would help you earn a higher score? Prayer or studying for the tests?
Yeah, there we go again. Same false premise. Prayer isn't meant to give you a higher score.
If you prayed for me over YouTube right now, do you think I would ever know about it somehow?
Not unless I told him. I don't know why he'd think otherwise.
What matters to God more, the quantity of prayers or the quality of prayers?
That's right, neither one. So we can skip the next 2 questions, which assume we answer one or the other.
Is it possible that your prayers have no supernatural effect and only serve to make you feel better?
I wouldn't say feel better, though. They serve more like to put you in your proper covenant role.
And if that were true, would you ever admit it?
Well, I just did admit it. What's that? That's it? Okay, we'll have another topic next time. And let me close by reminding Fundy Atheists out there that no, I don't make this stuff up, even though you might be too ignorant to know better. If you want to engage this intelligently, you can start by not making clueless accusations like that one. Because if you do, you're headed for a world of hurt. Until next time. The next cluster of questions could be broadly categorized as being about basis for belief, though they range around a little bit. Let's get to it.
Is there anything in your life right now that makes you doubt God's existence?
Well, that was simple enough.
If you did doubt God's existence, how would your life change?
Well, obviously I wouldn't be a Christian apologist as a profession. Beyond that, it might not change much. But I don't think how your life is affected personally is much of an argument for or against God existing.
Was Jesus white?
Well, those who see my vids know that I depict biblical characters from Palestine with a darker skin tone, like Peter here. That's the way it actually was.
Why does it seem more likely that God will help someone who is a talented athlete over a starving child overseas?
This isn't too clear, but it seems to go back to the prior issue on prayer. I can't say more than that since he doesn't say why it seems more likely. I don't think God helps talented athletes do anything, no matter what Tim Tebow thinks.
Why does God seem to hate Africa?
This is just the same question another way. I don't think God hates Africa.
If a group of people from, say, Africa came to your community with the intent to convert you to their tribal faith, would you listen to them and take them seriously?
That's my job as an apologist, but I'd do so anyway.
Does God speak to you personally?
That's a modern Christian myth as far as I'm concerned. The next two questions assume a yes answer to that one, so in theory I could skip them, but let me do one anyway.
If God spoke to you and told you to kill your child, would you do it?
Now before I answer that question, I want to know something. It's illustrated by this bit we'll take from a prior vid.
Told me to do. No, you don't. Move away from the child. Move away. That's it. Slowly. God told me that I have to kill him.
Okay, guys, let's clean this mess up.
This is supposed to be me? He looks like some guy who ate a bunch of mushrooms.
And this wimpy little toad is supposed to be me? What? Is he cold or something?
Hey, give him a break. He's used to drawing stick figures.
Oh no, not you again. What do you want this time?
What do you think, Nosko? Here you go again, screwing around with Bible stories like you've studied them beyond what you read in that free children's picture Bible at the dentist office. Do you have any idea what actually happened here?
Sure, that psychopath who hears voices cruelly tormented his son by nearly killing him.
You see what I have to deal with.
I'm not sure how you put up with it.
Okay, Nosko, you repeated the word psychopath enough times to bore me to death. How about we bring some contextual sense to this little charade of yours?
Context? What kind of context could justify this kind of psychopathic behavior by someone who hears voices in his head?
There you go with that psychopath crap again. And you can't even keep your story consistent with it.
What do you mean?
In your vid, you say Abraham was listening to voices in his head, as though to imply that he had some kind of mental illness. And you make him act like someone who's mentally ill. But at the same time, your narrative implies that God really did talk to Abraham, which means your story has it so that the voice in his head had an objective basis. So make up your mind, Nosko. Did God talk to him for real or didn't he?
Oh, come on, I'm an atheist. Of course I think God didn't talk to him for real.
Then how about you present the narrative in a way consistent with that, huh?
I don't get it.
So now let's repeat the question.
If God spoke to you and told you to kill your child, would you do it?
What I want to know is he asking this assuming that the voice I hear is just my imagination, or is he assuming it really is God's voice? Because it seems to me that if God really is talking to you and says to kill someone, it's probably for a good reason. I mean, think about it. What if God told you to kill this baby? Yeah, I know, some of you Fundy atheists are whining already. But what if I told you that baby grew up to be this guy? It's kind of ironic because I've had Fundy atheists ask me why God didn't kill Hitler as a baby. It's like you can't win no matter what you do.
Is God always watching over you? How about when you're on the toilet?
But it does depend on what you mean here. If you mean is God constantly monitoring you like with an eye on a camera, I don't see why that would be true. Omniscience implies only that he could, not that he constantly does.
What do you say to Muslims who believe the Quran is the holy book?
Islam isn't my specialty, but it is a specialty of these guys and they do their homework. If you think otherwise, feel free to take them on.
Are they wrong?
And you can go to the same place for an answer why.
Have you read the Quran?
Yeah, and let me tell you, it's hard to decide whether that was more boring or the Book of Mormon was.
And why do you so easily dismiss their holy book?
Well, if you want to call the depth of research I'd refer to at Answering Islam easy stuff, then you're the one with the problem.
Why do you get so upset at atheists who dismiss yours?
Now let me put it this way. I have yet to deal with an atheist who does quality research that shows they have a reason to dismiss it. Alright, that's all for this round. Time for part 4, and this one's short. The topic is homosexuality, which is an area I don't get much into, so I'll be declining answers on at least 2 of these until I can do further research. And the first 2 questions seem to me to be the same thing asked 2 different ways, so we'll put them together.
Is acting on one's homosexuality a sin? Is homosexuality itself a sin?
Yeah, you'd think he didn't know what the answer to that one would be. I'm also going to put together the next 2 questions, because there's a little unspoken premise here.
Do you believe gays and lesbians should have the right to get legally married? Would your church ever marry a gay or lesbian couple?
Now, here's the thing. One question asked about a legal marriage. The second one asked about a church marriage, and they're not the same issue. In my view, this whole brouhaha over same-sex marriage misses a very critical point. Some Christians are busy arguing to define marriage as one man, one woman, but they should first be trying to define it as a strictly religious ceremony performed by a religious body, over which the state has no business or control. In light of that, we can point out that a Mormon can't show up at a mosque and ask to have them perform a Mormon polygamous marriage. Nor can an atheist show up at a church and ask to be baptized. Right now, there are a few denominations that will perform same-sex marriages. So I'd say that if you want one of those done by a religious body, go see one of those denominations and have at it. But then we get to the other issue, legal marriages. Since marriage is a religious ceremony, the state shouldn't even have to consider this issue. Some have said that the state should only recognize legal relationships and call all of them something like a domestic partnership. I'll leave it to politicians to decide on things like that. But I'd say that if you Fundy atheists are so hot on separation of church and state, that's a solution that should make you happy. The next question assumes an answer I don't give, so I'll skip it. On to this one.
Why would God create people who are gay and then punish them for being gay?
This is one I'll defer on since I've never done research on the claim that people are created with a certain sexual orientation. That, after all, is one of the very questions at issue.
If God is already sending gay people who act on their homosexuality to hell, why do so many Christians feel the need to persecute them on earth?
Well, I don't know. Ask them, not me. I don't persecute any gay people, as he puts it, and certainly don't support persecution of anyone. Time for set number 5, and these are a mixed bag. Ready?
Why is God playing hide and seek with all of humanity?
Yeah, I don't think he is. I think the people who say this are like the little kid who covers his eyes playing hide and seek, and thinks that means you can't see him because his eyes are covered. Beyond that, we'd have to deal in arguments, which he doesn't get into here.
Do you believe Jesus is coming back to Earth in your lifetime?
I'd prefer not to assume, but I have to say there's a 99.9% chance here that he means all that tribulation and rapture stuff. Well, as a preterist, I don't buy any of that. I do think Jesus will return to Earth at some point, but it's not tied to any specific events, and it could happen in the next minute, or 1,000 years from now, or 100,000 years from now. The next question assumes an answer I don't give, so we'll skip it.
Why is the story of Jesus' birth and life so similar to that of mythological beings who lived before his time?
Oh yeah, I was going to give him credit for being a cut above most Fundy atheists until that one. He links his viewers to a list of 10 alleged parallels, and they're all old news to me except one. Check my own vid description for replies.
How do you decide which sections of the Bible are literally true, and which ones are metaphorical?
Oh, come on now. How do you decide this in English lit class? The process is no different, and it sure ain't rocket science.
What are the minimum requirements for being a Christian? And who falls under that definition?
This is one of those questions that front loads with a lot of assumptions. It would take too long in the context of this series to explain every requirement point by point, but two central things we can make light of here. One is that you have to believe Jesus was the broker of the covenant between God and man. The other is, well, you have to believe that Jesus' identity is the one taught in the New Testament. It doesn't do much good to believe in Jesus if you think Jesus was a space alien. I could lay out some more requirements, but if you don't have those two, you might as well not even get started.
Fred Phelps? Pat Robertson? James Dobson? President Obama?
Yeah, okay, look. Phelps, I know, has some heretical beliefs about Jesus, so he's out. Robertson, he has some aberrant beliefs, but as far as I can tell, nothing outside the pale of orthodoxy. Dobson, I think, has his nose in politics too much, but his theology is orthodox as far as I know. Obama, I don't know a thing about his theology, so I'll pass. So that's part 5. Time for part 6, and it's another mixed topical bag.
Do you really believe Mary was impregnated without ever having sex?
Oh, that was a hard one.
If someone came up to you and said she was pregnant, but she was totally a virgin, would you believe her?
Excuse me, but Mary isn't just some kid who came up to me a second ago. The validity of the virginal conception of Jesus is tied in with much broader truth claims and proofs, particularly Jesus rising from the dead. So let's not be so simplistic about it.
Why did God have to rape a teenage girl in order to become human?
Excuse me again, but rape requires sex, and there wasn't any sex involved. Just an act of creative fiat which the New Testament authors semantically parallel to the ex nihilo creation of Genesis. Beyond that, yeah, actually, by the ancient view of personhood, Jesus had to be born of a human woman to be considered human.
If you can go back in time to when Jesus was being crucified, would you try to save him? Or would you stand back and do nothing since your entire faith depends on him being crucified?
Yeah, okay. Dark Matter 2525 thought this dumb question was so brilliant and he made his own vid about it. But look, when Peter did try to stop all this, Jesus told him to back off. So do you think it would be any different for anyone else? No? Well, there's your answer. And it had nothing to do with my faith. Which, by the way, is dependent on Jesus rising from the dead, not him being killed.
What would it take to change your mind about God's existence?
Better evidence and arguments than you guys offer, that's for sure. And after last week with all those pagan copycat claims, I don't look for him to do it.
Do you think it's a little strange when someone says they're going to believe in something no matter what, even when all the evidence seems to point in the other direction?
Sure do, and I run into Fundy atheists who do that every day.
What is something your pastor has said in church that you totally disagree with?
Well, heck, let's just give a recent example. I'm a preterist. My pastor isn't. So I recently disagreed with a whole truckload of stuff he said in a recent sermon series.
And when that happened, did you confront your pastor about it?
Didn't have to. He already knew where I stood. And actually, he invited me to be part of a panel discussion on the subject of end times theology in front of the whole church. I guess I could say I'm in better stead than a lot of people when it comes to this sort of thing. For one thing, my pastor is a bit of a scholar himself. For another, he knows what I do and what my reputation is. But for the record, yeah, I've had pastors before that were not all there in the mental horsepower department, and I've corrected them on stuff. Like one time when one of them confused the Arian heresy with the Nestorian heresy. That guy didn't care much for the correction, though.
Why are there so many Christian denominations?
This canard. Well, we'll break for an answer on that one, shall we?
This episode of Mythbusters. How many pirates does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Arrgh!
Was the Hindenburg really destroyed by peanut butter? And are there really over 30,000 Christian denominations? Jelly Squirrel. Chelsea Kitten. They are the Mist Dusters.
So what's the fable this time, Chelsea?
It's simple to start, Shelley. We're checking out the claim that there are over 30,000 Christian denominations.
But that's not all there is to it, right?
Nope, it's not just the number. It's also what some Fundy atheists do with it. And so, once again, Shelley hits the books. And it doesn't take long to find out that at least one part of the fable is true. Or is it?
It turns out the source for this fable is a well-known and reputable reference resource, the 2001 World Christian Encyclopedia. It really does say that there are 33,909 Christian denominations. But that's not all it says.
So this is really interesting. If we're going to say one of those numbers, why not refer to those 6 major blocks and say that it means Christians are very unified? Or even those 300 major traditions?
Quite true, Chelsea. You could pick any one of those levels to prove whatever point you want to about Christian unity.
Now, since the numbers by themselves don't tell us anything, I guess the next step is to find out whether those 33,909 denominations really are at odds with one another. And so the girls take the next step, finding out what exactly denominations do. And what better way to do that than to visit some of them? So you're head of your denomination, right?
Yes, I am.
So you think all the other 33,908 denominations are stupid, right? The girls try a few more times, but nearly everywhere they go, the answer is pretty much the same. Until... So you think all the other 33,908 denominations are stupid, right?
Stupid? No. We do disagree with some things in some of the other denominations, but not all of them, and not all of the things they believe.
So why'd they start your denomination?
We serve a specific group of Indonesian immigrants in our state. We understand their needs very well, and we speak the same language, so we work best autonomously.
Yes, that's the key, Shelley. A denomination is defined foremost by autonomy, not by doctrines or beliefs. So I guess the bottom line is that 33,909 denominations doesn't mean 33,909 entirely different belief systems or theologies.
Yeah, and besides that, there's also different levels of doctrines that vary in importance. You can't just look at raw numbers and draw a conclusion. The number of denominations turned out to be the only thing that was right about this fable. So what should we call this one? Dusted?
Dusted.
Okay, back to the questions.
And are the people who are in those different denominations bad Christians? Are they wrong? Which denomination is right? Or which group of denominations is right?
Gee, it's not all black and white, you know? Some are bad, some are good, some are wrong about some things, some are right about others. Let's not view this in strictly Fundy terms, okay? Anyway, that's all for now. It's time to wrap up this 78 questions series. I'm sure you're all disappointed, but let's get right to it.
Who or what do you think is responsible for natural disasters?
Nothing but nature, folks. Sure, God can affect anything he wants, but if you're looking for me to pull a Joyce Meyer and say he changes the weather for family barbecues, you can forget it.
Can you pause the video right now and tell me what the 10 Commandments are?
I probably could. Of course, if I do it now, that'd be easy to say I was cheating. But it's also not that big a deal. I memorize all kinds of lists. I once won a free yogurt at TCBY for listing all 13 colonies on the 4th of July. Not making that up.
And if you can, why do so many Christians believe that the first 4 that belong on government property?
Don't ask me. I don't care if they're there or not, whether the first 4 or all 10.
Would you feel comfortable saying the Pledge of Allegiance in class every day if the words, one nation under no God?
Obviously not, but I'd also have tried to move away from any country if that was the norm long before now.
Do you think it's just a coincidence that different religions are popular in different parts of the world?
Not coincidence, no. Just a correlation of geography combined with available information, which has nothing to do with the information being true or false. And you'd guess right if you thought this would be the next question.
Do you believe that if you were born in Saudi Arabia, you would be a Muslim rather than a Christian?
Obviously it's possible, but either way, that's just a stupid point to make. If I was born in North Korea, I would probably also think that communism was the best political system. If I was born at the North Pole, I might think snow and ice were the only possible landscapes. All this does is avoid the real issue of what's true or not.
Is it possible that religion has less to do with what's true and more to do with the circumstances of where and when you were born?
For a lot of people, I'm sure it does. But again, that's an evasion of the issue of what is true.
If childbirth is an example of a miracle...
I'll cut that one off right there. I know many people use the term miracle for things like childbirth. I don't. Though I also don't think people who say that mean they think childbirth is a supernatural event. The last question assumes a yes for the prior one, so I'll skip it. Kind of ironic way to close. I think we've seen that most of these 78 questions are, well, just plain dumb. If you came thinking they were meant to make you think hard, you went to the wrong place. So are we done? Maybe not. I've gotten a request to take on another set from this character's neighborhood, and I might do it. But first we'll give our hardworking voice and art talent a break. Until next time, this is JP Holding. See ya.